Welcome everyone to the Contact Center Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. Today, I guarantee we are going to have a very enlightening, very energetic conversation. We're here with Sarah Caminiti. Now, Sarah, you're the head of customer support and service for the whole US for abcam. I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but we're going to be talking today about what are the systemic cracks in our CX foundation? What are those cracks? Why are they important? How do they impact growth? How do we solve these? And you've got so much insight from your professional background, but you're also a podcaster and you interview leaders all throughout the CX industry. And so I know as a fellow podcaster to another, we learn every single time we talk to somebody, don't we? Well, with that introduction, what I'd love to do is just maybe have you explain a little bit more about your background before we get started.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I have been in and around the CX space for close to 20 years, specifically building and scaling startups for their CX teams and in SaaS environments as well. My time at abcam is a little bit of a break out of my norm. I moved into biotech, and that has been a wonderful, eye-opening experience of how different types of companies and organizations approach the customer experience. But one thing remains the same, and that is a customer. And it's been great to be reminded that the people that we interact with are the same, no matter what the product is on the other end.
It's a good way to think about it. They're not numbers. These are individual people that are just trying to get things done and need help, just want to be treated as a person. I love that, just to get us started here. Very first question. How do you identify these systemic cracks, as you're calling it in the CX Foundation? Like if you could break that apart, the whole idea, and then maybe for like 20 seconds, I'd love to just say how important I think that you have this topic of our CX Foundation and why we need this. I always harken back to a McKinsey report that came out in 2023, and they looked at over 400 different highly profitable companies across B2B and B2C and had greatest return on shareholder value. And they found that the biggest differentiator, all those companies, was CX. That's how important it is. So I'm going to turn over to you from there. And like the idea of these systemic cracks in this foundation, what are they?
Yes. So I think as consumers, we all understand the feelings that we get when we interact with brands, when we use our money to support these brands. Do we feel valued? Do we feel heard? Are our questions answered? Are we able to self-service when we want to self-service? All of these things matter. And when you have that great experience that ends up turning you into a brand loyalist. But for the cracks, I think these cracks exist because for so long, customer experience was considered to be something that anybody could do. It took no skill. There was no real data that you could pull from it. There was no value for the bottom line. There was no true connection between the quality of the experience and the return of the investment for you've got your investors, your VCs that are paying attention. It's just you pay attention to sales, you pay attention to the marketing, you pay attention to product. But CX was always considered this less than. You don't really need to put money into it. You want to try and put as little money as you can into it. And it shows.
Yeah, the idea that you're a cost center. You're one of the biggest cost centers in the business. So certainly from the board level on down, we're going to have our KPIs around cost and how we're going to reduce those costs. And that's going to drive then the goals and the way that the customer support is even thought about and implemented. And it puts us down a rabbit hole that takes us so far away from what we know to be true, which is we're one of the biggest drivers of growth in the business. So tell me a little bit, like there's things like lack of budget control, power dynamics, things like that that are going on. Because everybody's going to agree that's on this podcast and what you're saying here. But the thing is, what do we do about it? If we don't understand those underlying factors, then we don't even know where to start in terms of how do we fix it? So what are some of those underlying factors?
How many hours do you have, Steve? Really, I think we need to start at the very beginning. And that beginning is the foundation. And one of the sad truths is that most companies do not start with someone that is experienced in the customer experience when they're building their processes, their strategies, their plans for the future. Usually you see founders say, I can do it. And they mean they want to connect with the customer, but they're missing that really important piece where a founder having a conversation with a customer is very different than someone that is experienced in the nuances of customer experience and how they would approach the conversation. And so from day one, you've got leaders of companies that are saying, not only is this something that anyone can do because I've never done customer experience and I'm going to go and do all of these things, but I can do it while I'm the CEO of a company, while I'm also building things with the developers, while I'm doing all of these things. So it's not something that requires time and effort and skill. So that's day one. And even if that's something that no one is acknowledging, because I don't really think that people do acknowledge it because it's so normal, you're saying that the customer is not valued enough for us to invest in how we treat them and figure out how they're going to be communicated with from the very beginning. And then that tells your staff, hey, we don't really need somebody to do this. Somebody just hop in there. Anybody can do this. It's fine. And so then when they hire that leader to then come and clean up all of these messes and start to build what should have been built months, sometimes years ago, they're already considered somebody that's not an equal to other senior leaders because everybody's already been doing this and they've been fine. It's totally fine. So they can't ever, that power dynamic from day one is you're not that important. We really just hired you out of desperation. We're going to give you a lot of KPIs that you don't actually have any control of what the outcomes are on them, but it makes sense for you to own them. And then we're going to continue on our way. And what a horrible way to build this ecosystem with your company and how that impacts the customer.
So I think to start to solve this is where we have to start to connect the dots, right? On how does CX actually impact the growth of the business? Because all the perceptions, all the challenges, everything that you just said would it flip on a dime if people believed that it actually impacted the long-term growth of the business. So what are your thoughts on and connect those dots for us here?
Yeah, let's connect a lot of dots here, Steve. So, from the beginning, if you hire someone that is a CX foundational architect, they are then put in a position where they are connecting the data from the customer to each piece of business decisions. Because how many times have we all worked in companies where all of these product decisions, all these marketing decisions actually had zero to do with the feedback that you were getting from the customers? And each time you would bring them, actually, they're really struggling with this. Can we work on this? We've got too much tech debt. We can't do that. So it's just this ongoing circle of no's. And so you have to start to connect these dots from day one or have a reset if you're past day one and say, I'm going to be better and I'm going to listen to the customer. The only goal of this company is to listen to the customer and build and serve them to the best of our ability. That's not saying go and build things that Joe Schmo said a pipe dream about, like when he was going on a tangent about how he wants all these refunds. No, identify who your ICP is, lock that in, but allow that to evolve because sometimes your product is going to fit this niche market that you never intended. And that's not a bad thing. Embrace that. See if this is something that you want to explore, allow them to be in your space. Always be listening, and you listen by collecting data. And all of that data exists in these customer interactions. And yes, we want to make it so that people don't have to reach out to support. Yes, you're getting a very specific situation for people when they reach out, but it is so much more telling and more valuable than those folks that complete those NPS surveys or those CSAT surveys because you are touching people, actual customers in a moment when they were struggling. And how you choose to approach them and help them is how they are going to feel about your company and the products that you have. So that connects to the bottom line over and over again because churn is going to happen every single time someone has a bad interaction with either support or with their product. And they're saying over and over again, "Why isn't this fixed? Why isn't this fixed? This is broken." And we keep saying, "I'm sorry, it's not in the pipeline. It's not in the pipeline. Look elsewhere." If they're gonna tell their friends, "Don't waste your time here." It just grows and grows.
It's interesting because the most important thing is bad customer experience is one, can create the churn. That's all it takes. We all know that. But especially like as an example in the SaaS world, you've got people that are ending their free trials and things like that are calling in and asking questions. And this is one of their first actual interactions with what this company is going to be like. So conversions are an important part of growth. And then in the middle there's cross-selling, there's upselling, and there is a very, very sales-oriented function that the contact center has, that customer support has in the business, as well as there's not one company out there. And if you can find one, I'd love to interview them that literally doesn't say, we don't want to be a customer-centric company. We don't want to be a customer-focused company. We want to make all the decisions on our own. And by the way, I've been a SaaS founder before, so I know what it's like to make all those product decisions and roadmap decisions. This is what we want to do. Oh, this is what we think is a good idea. But the fact that if we can get our leaders to agree that being a customer-centric, customer-driven, customer-obsessed company is our path to success. And we say, would you want to know a little bit about all these thousands and thousands of interactions we're having with our customers? And there's not going to be a leader out there that says, no, I don't. So then it's incumbent upon us that how do we translate that? So there is a story to be told from all those thousands of interactions that has to get told and prioritized and summarized so that the different departments and leadership get it. That is an art. So once again, back to what you said before about not just anybody can do this. So how important is that translation of what we're learning over to the different departments and into leadership? And just what's your philosophy on how to do that? How to get that done? How to do that right?
I think that this is one of those times when saying it takes two to tango really is a valuable thing to acknowledge, because it's been disappointing to see so many narratives in the CX world be that it's the CX leader's fault why no one is paying attention to any of the data that they're sharing. They're doing it wrong. They're approaching things wrong. When the actual reality is, we have built our careers in a space where we have never had a voice. And now we are taking control of that and we're being loud about it. But every company operates differently. And it is the responsibility of every other department, if they do not feel like it is being presented in a way that makes sense to them, to then say, "This is actually a really helpful way for me to absorb this information. Next time, let's work together so that all of the information that makes sense is there and you know what to give us so we can move forward with this." Instead of what happens so much, where the CX person pours their heart and soul into trying to figure out what these people need. You do sessions with your mentor, you read all these books, you listen to podcasts to tell you what you need to do, and you give it to them, and then they never invite you back. They don't tell you why. They might say, "You're just bringing us solutions. You need to come about this as a problem." And that is such a horrible thing to get for feedback from someone that should technically, in most situations, be your peer. Because as a leader, you are usually going to an equal on paper leader, but you are not treated with that same level of respect. And so then it's, "Oh, you just don't get it. You don't get it." And then your value and your input, the value of your input just keeps getting lower and lower. And not because you did anything wrong, because no one values you enough in your position to actually allow you to use this information well within the company. And yes, you have to be able to figure out how to present this information, but the other leaders have to respect you enough to help you figure out how to present this information because we're not mind readers. We're just doing our best.
There was an interview I had with a Goldman Sachs value accelerator advisor. And she said one of the most powerful things inside of any organization is the voice of the customer. And as I'm listening to you talk, the way that I'm taking this is that really customer support is a voice of the customer as a service to the rest of the company. And if you thought about it that way, as leaders, as we think about it that way, because over our careers, we've all gone into a bunch of meetings where people were looking at their watches, didn't know why they were there, doodling on their scratch pad. But if you talked about something that made sense and you talked about something that just was going to help them dramatically, all of a sudden you get people's attention. So part of this is, I think, as I'm hearing you talk, is we have to take our rightful seat at the table. Yes, we have to earn it, but if we sit in that seat and we have something important to say and we tell the story well, then we're going to get invited back and they're going to make a seat at the table for us. So one of the things that after talking to lots and lots of leaders in the industry is I think that we have to just get better at having our own bit of self-confidence in who we are and what we're doing.
Yes, that's it. That's right there. I think one of the things I've had a very transformative year. 2024 was a really incredible year for me. And one of the things that I took away from it that has just changed my life is realizing I have entered jobs kissing the ring every time. I'm so grateful that you took a chance on me. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And by entering into a job in a head of position, VP position with that kind of a mentality, you have automatically cemented the power dynamic within that space of I am not worthy of this, but you have given me this gift and I owe my career to this gift that you have given me. And you've diminished all of your accomplishments by doing it that way. And when I was interviewing at abcam, I decided to own my worth. I figured out how to articulate my value and own my worth. And once I did that, I saw how different you are in on your first day, in your first week, in your interactions with others because from the very beginning, you have not been second guessing all the things that you're saying. You've not been downplaying all of your accomplishments. No, I went in there on all of my interviews. I said, these are the things that need to be fixed. This is how I would approach it. These are the things we're going to struggle with because this actually makes no sense. And I was considered the authority that I am. And so I started to have these great conversations from the very beginning. And so you're so right, Steve. We have been pushed down. Our self-confidence, our self-worth in our careers have been devalued because we are told that we're replaceable, and we're not replaceable. We are skilled. We have so much value. We prove our value every single day, and we need to own it. And if we're going to be in a place that's not going to appreciate that, then we're not in the right place and we need to find another space. That's if we're owning our worth and we are advocating for the customer and we are able to build a team that we are so proud of and the customers feel that and we are met with nothing on the other side, no opportunity to collaborate, slam doors, not getting those invites, and you're asking why, and they might just go around and around in circles. But every time they go around and around in circles, you keep asking yourself that why, and the answer is always they don't value me enough. They don't value my team enough. They don't value the customer enough to respect me and my position within this company, compensate me enough so that I can be an equal amongst my peers within this company. And you have to be empowered to get to that space.
So You mentioned something in there that I think is another incredible key. You mentioned creating the right team. So we spent a lot of time talking about us as the customer leaders, what we need to do and the rightful place we need to take. But we all know as leaders that we're only as good as the team that's around us. So tell me a little bit about the kind of team that you think is a key to the solution to these systemic cracks in the CX foundation.
Oh, I love that you asked this. I had a call yesterday with someone that I just adore, and she was asking me questions about hiring. And so we were talking about team building and the skills that you need to look for when you're building your teams. And I think it plays a big role in the amount of money that you have, what your budget is for the type of professionals that you can invite into your space. And if you are given the ability to hire well, then you will be hiring folks that have been around for a while and they understand the nuances of the CX space. And by that, they understand how to do the due diligence to verify all of these random things that you have to verify before you even initiate a conversation with a customer. They understand how to put together their responses in a way that the customer feels safe to ask more questions, but you've already given them more than what they realized they needed, but it's not overwhelming at the same time. So the way that you structure your conversation with the customer is such a skill and it takes so much practice and work. And sometimes you just don't have it. And that's okay. That's why this is such a very specific career path for people. But you also need to have people that understand data and understand root cause analysis and are able to spot things. And that comes with years of being in this space. So I've learned working in small teams. I have a very large team now, and efficiency and optimization really do make or break you. Because if you've got a team of 15 and half of them can do what, the other half can do in 2 days, and you're trying so hard to make all of this work, you're spending so much time away from the actual gold mine that you're sitting on, and you could probably have the same result with 7 very skilled professionals that are able to just fly through things, analyze things, pass the torch, and do all these things async, build the documentation, delegate, incorporate other areas of the business, and build those relationships and bridges. You need to have people on your team that are an extension of you because you are not expected to know everything. And so hire people that fills the gaps and makes you stronger.
Something that you mentioned early on in one of our conversations is that it's hard to get the right budget to build a team,
Yeah.
but being an advocate for yourself is a big part of that. If you haven't told that story of how important you are to the rest of the business, how you can interact and impact all the departments and long-term growth, why would you get more money? So there's a job role, there's a responsibility that needs to be put into the job role of everyone as a CX leader. I've got to be a good internal salesperson. I got to be a really good internal advocate because with the perceptions that you talked about, the money's not going to come flowing your way automatically. When sales asks for more money, everybody's listening. Everybody's like, okay, come on. But that team that you're talking about, so important. And not everybody has the luxury to have a team of 15. Some people have a lot more, but some people are making by with a team of 2 or 3. But you can do a lot with even a little. You don't have to show massive support across the board, all departments, everything all at once. Pick a mountain to climb. Pick where you can actually know with your team you could make a big difference right now and demonstrate and say, wouldn't it be great if we did that again and again and again and this way and this way and this way? So, I mean, if you had to say, yes, I want to wear the advocate hat, what are the things that an advocate, a salesperson needs to think about? What is it that you're selling? What are you supporting? You're changing perceptions. So you've been very articulate what those perceptions are. What is it that you're selling? You're a salesperson now.
Yes, and I think that it's really important as a salesperson, an internal salesperson, to remember that you have to take all of the feeling out of everything, and you have to stick with the data. And you have to learn how to use the data that you have in a way that makes sense in many different ways. Key ways that I have seen a really big impact with using data to advocate for either growing a team or driving product changes is I started tracking not only who was the person that helped the customer, but who else was involved in order to solve this interaction? Did they have to ask a question to somebody in engineering? Okay, how long did it take to get that? Was there a lot of back and forth? Okay, now they had to go and update a document because they realized that it wasn't up to date. And so they needed to make sure that it was accurate moving forward. All right, how much time was spent to do that? And you start to build these really real scenarios of because I do not have the support I need from product, we have spent $30,000 over the last year helping people solve this one issue. It is because I don't have the staff that I need or I don't have the tools that I need. I am having to manually do this myself as the VP of something in order to solve this problem. And that equates to this amount of money. And the impact that this has on the customer experience you're then able to prove because something wonderful that's happened in one of my roles is over my tenure there, CX was the number one reason why people renewed their subscriptions. And they would say over and over, this was a premium product. There were many other options out there. There were definitely some waves that came crashing every now and then, but people stuck around because they knew that this was a space that we wanted them to be successful. And that was because I built a team that understood how to make them successful and then we built manually, a lot of the times, different tools to help us navigate how to make them successful. And in order to be a good advocate, you just have to be obsessed with data.
All of those things that you're talking about, conversions on trials, upsells, cross sells, re-signing up for your subscription again and again and again, and lifetime value, and like these are all KPIs that leaders look at. So as an
Yeah.
advocate, you're going to know your audience. If you're selling to an audience, what do they care about? It's the number one rule in sales and marketing. Know your audience and what's important to them and start talking their language. They're going to be like, wow, I had no idea Sarah was such an astute business person.
Yes, you have to make it count. And I think that's one of those that goes back to that empowerment, Steve, where if this is something that you're going to commit to within your organization, you can't go halfway and dip your toes in it because it's that first impression sort of thing. So even if you haven't felt comfortable or confident enough to lean into the data and share the data, I think it's really important to remember that when you do decide to do it, take time. Check it out, make sure that you're presenting it in a way that you're proud of, make sure that you understand how people are gonna be absorbing it, what questions they're gonna be asking you about it, because if you go into that room and you present something that you just threw together in because you were feeling really excited after listening to this podcast, and then you can't answer any of the questions, that's bad data now because you're no longer an authority on the data, and they can't really trust that what you're going to be sharing with them is information that is accurate or valuable. So understand the data before you make that leap. And once you do, then you'll start to fight a little bit harder because one of the key things about being an advocate for the customer, for your team, and for yourself is you have to know that what you're saying is valid. You have to know that this is the truth and this is worth fighting for. And so if you're entering these spaces and you're like, this bug that we've had for so long is causing customers to churn. It's causing my team to have to spend this much time trying to come up with workarounds. This is nuts. And they're still saying, we don't have the time for it. It's not in the pipeline. We don't think it's valuable enough. Then you need to go back and come up with a better way to present that data. You can't just say, okay, I'll move on to the next thing. You've got to fight.
I love that. I can feel the fighting. So we've talked about a lot, and our poor human brains, we can't retain too much at one sitting. If there was one takeaway that you wanted other CX leaders to take away from this podcast, what would it be?
You are so much more valuable than you give yourself credit for. And just be really proud of what you're doing because what you're doing matters.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So it's such a great way to end this. I know people are going to have questions. Would it be appropriate that we would give out a link to your LinkedIn profile that people could reach out and ask questions?
Yes. Yes, please find me on LinkedIn. If you're part of the CX community, join Elevate CX. It's a Slack community, but we also do events. We're on LinkedIn. We do a bunch of great things to try to empower leaders within CX. And like Steve mentioned earlier, I also have the podcast. Season 1 was titled Epical Growth, where we celebrated great leaders doing great things in and around CX. Season 2, we're going in the same vein, but a little bit different, a little more focused, because I actually have a chance now to focus it. And season 2 is going to be the retention strategist, where we're going to be taking all of these great leaders and all of these great things that they're doing, and we're going to be tying it to the bottom line, because at the end of the day, that's how we're going to be driving a lot of this change.
I love it. Thank you, Sarah, for coming on and sharing and making us feel good about who we are and what we're doing. I love it.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for not only inviting me, but being open to this conversation. I know that some of this stuff is a little taboo, but if we're quiet about it, nothing's going to change. So I really appreciate you.